this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I was just out here with the actual stills camera because I've got a few first time bloomers here that I want to capture, and while I was at it I thought I'd have a look through my notes, and there's still quite a few non-bloomers in here. I won't say there's loads, but you know, there's some notable ones, shall we say. I mean, I don't count new orchids. I mean, the brassavola up here, I've only just got that, and it may have some spikes that will develop. But, you know, I mean, when you buy a plant that's not in bloom, eventually it becomes a first-time bloomer. Or we hope it does. And, yeah, I mean, I've still got some notable ones. I mean, my Orangus Mr. Sidii over here, that's never bloomed. But looking at pictures of blooming plants on the internet, that does seem quite small. So maybe it's just still a young plant. You know, maybe. But there's no sign of any spikes on it. I was just having a quick look while I was at it. But what other thing I noticed was once I'd taken the pictures of the first time bloomers, and you know, I get them on the computer and downsize them because the camera takes enormous file size pictures, so I reduce their size because they're only kept for pop-ups, so they, you know, they don't need to be massive files, they just need to maintain the quality so that they show up okay. And I was amazed how many, when I was updating my notes, how many orchids have actually bloomed and I didn't take a picture. Now that's really annoying, you know, especially when perhaps they may not bloom again for some time. I mean, some notable ones in that set, my Dendrobium anosmum bloomed really well this spring. I didn't take a picture, you know, so that's one of my, you know, important dendrobiums to me, one of the winter resting types that takes a bit of looking after to get to bloom, and it did, and I didn't take a picture. Yeah, there are a few lurking around that haven't had a picture taken when they have actually bloomed. I mean, that's a notable non-bloomer, that Bulbophyllum sycamense. Lovely plant, and it grows really well. There's a couple of Tolumnias. There's two in there that have bloomed and I didn't take a picture, and I think there's still at least two in there that haven't bloomed. Two that nearly died, that have now recovered but still have yet to bloom. So, you know, I think most of the Oncidium types I've got have bloomed and their pictures have been captured, so I'm okay with the Oncidiums. I mean, apart from this new edition here, I haven't bought any Oncidiums for some time, and a lot of the Oncidiums I've had for quite a while, so they've had quite a few chances to get their mugshots done. I think all the Masdevallias have bloomed at some point in the past, and they've all had their picture taken. The problem I've got is I used to have quite a few hybrid Masdevallias, and now I think I've only got one left. And as a consequence, I don't know which one it is. So I've got, although I've got all the pictures, I don't know which picture goes with the plant I've got, if you see what I mean. I've still got some non-bloomers in the Paphiopedilums, but effectively they're the two miniature rescue plants from my daughter that, you know, literally had no roots when I got them, so they've got an excuse. They're allowed. A couple of dendrobiums. I mean, my Rhodostictum is coming into bloom. It's actually got a second spike coming over the other side. This is, I think this is its third time or maybe even its fourth time blooming, and I still haven't got a picture. Come on! I won't forget this time, because if it's going to put up 4 blooms, in the past I've had a habit of trying to capture a single bloom for a pop-up, and I've realised that quite often a picture of a cluster of blooms is actually nicer than a single bloom singled out, literally, for a picture to use as a pop-up. I mean, they don't all work like that. Some of them only have single blooms. Also, while I was at it, I was just going over the Cattleyas and which ones are in bud, and it has dawned on me that a lot of my Cattleyas are late winter bloomers, you know, sort of January, February, March time. So there's me constantly checking sheaths to see if they've got any buds. Well, the buds aren't due on that for another couple of months. You know, this is an annual bloomer, once a year in this particular case, and it's not ready to bloom yet. So I'm checking for things that don't exist. So yeah, I've got some non-bloomers that are recent purchases. Well, you know, you patiently wait for those, don't you? But I've got some that I've had some time that are still non-bloomers. And they after a while begin to get on your nerves on the grounds you think, you know, well, how far off their culture can I possibly be that they just refuse to bloom? This Epidendrum nocturnum, I mean, that has bloomed before and I failed to capture the bloom. What's interesting with this is it looks like the spike's branching. I must admit, in my mind I always thought that was a single bloom type spike, but the bud is swelling nicely now. I must get that in case it self-pollinates, and it looks like there'll be a secondary bud coming on behind, and the old spike started to extend as well. So I have many opportunities on this plant to capture the bloom, so I won't miss it this time, that's for sure. What else? There's been quite a few. In the Dendrobium range I found 3 that have bloomed that I failed to get a picture of. But in the main those are due to bloom again, so you know, all is not lost. What is sad is when something has been in bloom and then the plant's lost, so you've just got no record of what those blooms look like. But I'm going to try and keep on top of this now, because you know, the videos are more important nowadays than they perhaps were a year or 2 ago. Like I said, I always treat YouTube as my job now, especially as I get some money for it. So I think of it as work. You know, I've got a job to do. Making the videos, posting them, looking after the comments, and dealing with my channel. That's my job. My orchids are my hobby. You know, I'd do that even if YouTube didn't exist. But it does. I've joined in with the orchid video stuff and I like doing it, so at the moment that's not going to change, that's for sure. Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting to see. I've also got a folder of the pictures that I've taken of all the plants that I've lost in the past, so if I do lose a plant or I sell it or give it away, I still keep the picture as a memory of something I once had. That's quite a large folder. There's quite a bit in there. It's very sad looking through the cattleyas I lost with the fusarium. You know, I mean, I had a particular seller that sold a lot of cattleyas and I bought a lot and they were all infected. And this was prior to me having any knowledge of what even it was. I just thought it was me. But yeah, there's some sad losses in there. Still, maybe one day they can be replaced or substituted. You know, there's quite a lot of the more complex cattleya type hybrids that, you know, they might come round once in a blue moon, and if you get it and you really like it and you lose it, it's sometimes almost impossible to ever replace. But you can often find one that's very similar, and I've got my eye out for a couple, having just looked through that folder. Yeah, so yeah, just a chit-chat thing this morning really. I was just going to have a look at that. Have you got a spike yet? No, it's the latest growth on one of my zygos. If it's going to spike, it's probably going to do it soon. They tend to spike quite earlier on in the growth. And the other one I'm keeping my eye on is my large Coelogene. Now that blooms straight out of the top of the crown, basically. I don't see any sign of anything coming out. That's the most advanced of the new growths. There's several other new growths coming on behind, but and I mean, last year I had 3 good strong new growths, but only 2 bloomed. So there's no guarantee each new growth is going to bloom on this one yet. I mean, the other plants I've seen of this recently at some of the shows, Burnham's had quite a few on show. They're pretty big plants compared with mine. So mine would still be relatively, for the type of plant, quite a young one. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's just interesting to see plants that I've had some considerable time that have yet to bloom. And I've got a little mental list of those, you know, on the grounds that they're going to get given an amount of time, but there's a limit to my patience. You know, a plant that just refuses to bloom takes up space. And if you ask somebody, the classic answer is nearly always, oh, my so-and-so won't bloom. Oh, it needs more light. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just, it sounds daft, but it's just too happy. You know, it's just too busy putting on loads of new growths and being happy doing it. Some are just notoriously difficult to bloom. Some, yes, perhaps they need more light. But most things in here get more than enough light. I mean, I did have a, what was it? Rhyncholalia glauca. That's a notorious difficult plant to bloom because of the sheer light intensity it actually needs, which in the UK is not easy. It's real, you know. Anyway, that one's gone now, so I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, so I will try and keep up with the first time bloomers and make sure they do get their picture taken, get their mugshot in the file, so that it can just be pulled up as and when. Because you're often talking about, or I'm often talking about, a plant that sometimes, I mean, if take these two rescue cattleyas over here, they are appalling looking plants. But that's a good strong new growth on this one. So this one is going to make it. This one, maybe not. I mean, it did grow a pathetic new growth last winter, but it hasn't put on any more growths this year. Whereas this one's put on a nice growth, it's strong, and it now has some roots, so it's capable of supporting itself, just about. We'll see how that one goes. But strangely enough, although these two pieces came off a plant that died effectively, these were the little bits that I rescued, I've actually got a picture of that one. Mind you, that was pretty spectacular when that bloomed. That was one of my, it happens sometimes, you go away for a few days and when you come back things have magically popped up, you know, and opened while you're away, and that was one of those. And when I came, because I'd never seen it bloom before, I came back from a few days away and there was this cattleya in bloom with the most enormous spectacular blooms that I'd never seen before, and it was so unexpected. I don't know what I was expecting, but I certainly wasn't expecting that bloom. So I'm glad I've managed to get one of these growing again. And this one's lagging behind. It still may pull on eventually, but I mean, I've been rescuing these two pieces for over nearly a year and a half now, and that's the best it's done so far, and this one hasn't. So those two are hard work, they are. Yeah, so yeah, if you do YouTube videos and the idea of pop-up blooms, you know, is something you can do. I mean, not everybody does loads of editing on their videos, they just point the camera and shoot, which is what I do most of the time. But I do like, if I'm talking about a specific plant, I do like to have a picture of the bloom, if it's not actually in bloom. You know, it makes the videos a little more interesting having a little pop-up. So I'll try and keep on top of it. And there's some that haven't bloomed for some time. That's a sort of different category, and most of those are in what I would call a recovering state. It's a classic one up the back here. You see that lovely strong dendrobium cane there? I've had real trouble with that dendrobium trying to get that thing to grow, and this year, it's just decided to start growing. That's one of the black hair types, and it's an infundibulum cross. That has gorgeous blooms on it, and I have got a picture, but it hasn't done it for a long time. So that's one of those where the picture's sitting there never used, collecting dust. I mean, most of my orchids, I suppose, are, you know, once a year, sometimes more frequently, especially in the Oncidium sort of types, because they tend to have less than an annual cycle. But yeah, quite a lot of my cattleyas are annual, just once a year, and quite a lot of them, looking at my notes, actually bloomed last February, March time. So I mean, obviously out of the ones that are in bloom at the moment, the big one up there, the angel heart, that's got a cycle that's less than a year. Yeah, so that one blooms more frequently than once a year. That'll be to do with the hybridization within it, because I'm sure its parents were probably once a year jobs. This is obviously an autumn, early winter bloomer, as is the little yellow one up there. Yeah, so they're not all winter bloomers. These might be out of season, but given that this is where the new growths have matured and decided to bloom, this is probably it's going to be its normal time of year. But again, time will tell, so we shall see. Yeah, so just a quick chat, and I'll see you next time. I'm not up to much in here today. I can see my Draculas need watering. They're half dry out quick in the moss. But apart from that, I'm not actually watering anything today. The mounts were done yesterday, and they have long the days of watering them every day are forgotten now. They're in the past. It's once every 2 days, and if they're dull days, it's once every 3 days now. So my workload has dropped off dramatically. And even my cooler growers down here that shouldn't dry out at all, whereas they were coming round every 3 or 4 days in that heat wave, it's more like every 6 or 7 days now, apart from these two nuisances. They dry out very quickly, and they shouldn't dry out at all. I mean, the other day I watered them and the moss was crispy. It doesn't do them any good to have a dry spot like that. It puts a stomp on them. You know, they sort of stall. Now, if it's only for a very short period, by the time it's realised it's lost its growing medium, it's been watered again, so it doesn't register. But a long period of dryness and the roots could shrivel, so I've got to go careful with those. It's the same with my Neo that I potted up the back there, that I had a go at doing in the Japanese style. Because that's only got moss, and it's also hollow inside, if you saw the repotting video, that dries out really quickly. Whereas when it was in its pot, it was missing a watering run. Almost every time I was getting to that sort of 5 or 6 days, going round watering the pots, and that one was still wet from the previous time. So obviously that media was not good for it to stay wet that long. It's just not good, especially in the winter, because the Neos like to be a bit drier in the winter. And if you've got a media that doesn't dry out quickly at all, that's not ideal. That's not how... I mean, the place they grow in Japan, they get cold, dry winters, you know. They don't get a huge amount of rain. They get snow sometimes, but they don't get a lot of rain. Right, I shall leave it at that for today. This is just a chatty one today. And I've got quite a bit of watering to do tomorrow, if I get round to it. But today, we've just had a couple of sunny days. Cold, but sunny. Now, when it's cold outside, but sunny, in here gets warm. But today's a dull day and cold. So I just cannot get the temperature up in here today. That's about as best as it's going to get. And at the moment, I've just got a job to do. This is sucking heat out of the house. When I went to bed last night, I opened the door so that residual heat in the house stops the grow room needing the heater. And it works. I mean, I suspect I went down to about 12 last night because it was really cold. Yeah, we went down to 12, which is my minimum if I had the heater going. Unfortunately, the house this morning was only 15 degrees when I got up. Nearly had to put my hat and coat on. Yeah, so, you know, it is the time now. I need to get the heater down here so that when there's a potential for a really cold night, I can actually pull the door across to stop all the heat coming out of the house, so that it's, you know, because obviously I'm trying to reheat that house in the morning after I'm out of bed and I'm cold, so I can do without that. And that way the the grow room heater can stop this dropping down below 12 instead of losing all the heat out of the house like I've been doing over the last few nights, because we are having a cold snap at the moment. So yeah, wiring and fiddling around with wires today and changing the setup a bit, but I'll get on and do that. That does need to be done. And on a day when I'm not watering, at least I'm doing something in here. You know, it's not like a lost day. The Cymbidium's in here now. Again, that has been put on a windowsill outside in shelter where it can't get rained on because it was absolutely soaking wet. So I've dried it off a bit, and it's too cold at night now to leave that outside, so I've had to bring it in. And this floor is getting a bit cluttered. There's some big stuff here that can't really go anywhere else. But all it means for me is I need to take care when I'm carrying something to watch me feet and not start kicking stuff. And in addition to that, when I need to get at like this area over here, these will have to be picked up and moved. Well, that's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. But it is getting a bit cluttered in here. And yet there's still space. The clear out that I've had this year has been, you know, I mean, these shelves down here are very, very sparsely, you know, I've got stacks of room. You know, there's a room for another couple on there. That back shelf over there has only got 2 plants on it. There's room for another 3 or 4 there. So I've actually got some shelf space, but it's the type of shelf space. It's not highlight shelves, you know, although I get away with it soon. In fact, I might even do it today. This shade netting's coming off. The sun hardly does anything on this window now. By the time it gets round to shine on this window and comes out from behind the tree, it's so weak as to not be relevant as far as burning leaves or anything is concerned, even through the glass. So that's going to come off. That'll be another today job. The shade netting here has got to wait a while. There are some sensitive plants that the sun would actually shine on. What I've got to do is just wait a little bit longer when it drops down low enough in the sky that next door's fence provides a shadow, and I need that shadow to be about there so that these don't get direct sun through the glass. Now that's the point I'm waiting for, and then that will come off as well. And then the resting dendrobiums that are not benefiting from these lights because they're up the back will effectively get all the light they need. Yeah? So that's the idea. Anyway, I'm going to get the heater out, blow the dust off it, wire that up, set the thermostat, and get that shade netting off. Jobs for today. See you next time. That's a few jobs done for the day. That shade netting's down. And I know everybody's going to say, why don't you clean your windows? Well, at the moment, I'd rather that the dirty windows filtered the sun a bit. Because for about an hour, hour and a half, it's going to come in at an angle directly on these plants while it's still quite high in the sky. So the dirty windows serve a purpose at the moment. So that's that done. My little heater's out. Now, although that's an oscillating heater, I actually have it fixed. I may switch it to oscillate this year, it depends, but it makes a horrible squeaky noise when it oscillates. And it's just annoying when you're sitting quietly in the evening and all you can hear is going on in the background. The fan itself makes quite a racket. But anyway, that's now wired up to the thermostat and also that fan. So when the heater comes on, so does that. The reason that comes on as well is to just move the air quickly around the grow room while the heater is active. Otherwise I'm going to get hot spots. Some plants will get cooked and the heat will sit in certain places because the movement of the air won't be great enough. So that thing comes on at the same time, so they're hooked up together at the moment. So that's that done. And at the moment this fan's on manual, which means I've got to turn it on and off. But most days it can probably just be switched on and left until the temperature in here starts to cool down. I'll debate that. I think what I did last year is I wired all 3 of these together on the thermostat and then set the temperature at night and turn that one off manually on the switch so that that and that come on when the heater's in use. And then when I want these fans on during the day, I play with the thermostat to change the minimum temperature and turn the heater off. But I haven't made my mind up. That sounds like a lot of faffing around at the moment. The way it's set at the moment, all I've actually got to do is turn that on when I want it on and turn it off when I finish with it. And everything else just stays set. So that's probably how I'll leave it. But I mean, I have to come in and plug the lights in and turn the lights on manually, because I can't be bothered playing with the timer and having to adjust it relatively frequently, because the days are all dropping down in their length now. I mean, we're down below 10 hours now, and very soon we'll be down below 9. Once they start moving, they move at a hell of a rate. So the amount of time the lights are on will increase, and also their start time changes because it gets dark earlier in the day, so they need to come on a bit earlier. And at the moment, most of the days I'm here. When I'm not, tough. Things will have to lump it. But at the end of the day, the plants are getting a lot more light than they used to get. So if on the odd day they don't get it, it'll be the equivalent of a very cloudy day in the wild. That's all it'll be. See you next time.